if you weren't on the other one, thank you for joining us for this time. And I have a very special guest. Diane's actually going to give it a go again, and hopefully she'll forgive us now that we know that it was actually on our end. And I'm going to give her the introduction right now, and then Alvin, who's my trusty helper, is going to transfer it over to Diane to take it away. So in case you don't know me, I'm Greg Warner. I'm the founder of MarketSmart, and I created this company to help nonprofits treat their donors how I, as a donor, wanted to be treated. Diane is going to share today some of the principles that have made us successful, and I'm excited to hear her perspective on how to ask donors and potential donors for major gifts. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Diane. She's been working with nonprofits for the past 15 years, beginning with working for a child welfare agency. She's got a proven track record of bringing multiple 5-figure and 6-figure gifts through sharing compelling stories and meeting in person to build strong relationships with donors. Her background working with both large and small nonprofits has given her a unique perspective on the challenges facing any organization. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this, and I can see that all of you can see her screen now. So thank you, Diane, for joining us again.
Well, thank you, Greg, and welcome back to those of you who heard the first maybe 25 minutes a couple weeks back, and welcome to those of you who are new today, and I will take it from here.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay. So, why am I here today? How did I get to be in this seat? And the answer is that I volunteered at a child welfare nonprofit. I ended up on a board. I ended up in a capital campaign, and I liked it. And I realized that is not everyone's experience, but I spent a lot of time thinking about why that is. And it is really my thoughts about what makes fundraising fun, rewarding, and productive that drive what I have to say today. So that's the big frame that we'll have for the next 90 minutes, which is really about giving donors the opportunity to do something that will make them feel good. By contrast, and I use this parallel the last time because I find that people do find the analogy effective, I think that many people, when they come to fundraising, they think of themselves as a dentist there to extract something, take something away from donors, as opposed to the framework I'd like to propose today, which is what you're actually doing, is you're in the role of Dr. Feelgood, and your role is to really make donors feel good as they do something with their financial resources that they want to. And then additionally, I'm very technique oriented. I work a lot with smaller nonprofits. So in my mind, I've still distilled major gift fundraising down to memorizing a sentence, learning 2 techniques, and suggesting that's what you need to at least get started, meaning to get out the door, because I think getting out the door is what's key. So I'd like to start the session pre-agenda. There will be an agenda, but I like to start at the place that many people who are less experienced are wondering about, and that is literally, how do I ask for the gift? And this is the memorize the 1 sentence. It's the only place I'm going to ask you to use very specific language that's been proven to be effective. Is there other ways to make a solicitation? Yes, there are, but this one is very tried and true and relatively universal, so that's why I like to start with it. And as you'll see in 1 second, this language, it's very precise, it respects the donor, and I like to say it goes down easily. There's really nothing to bump against. And what is that language? That language is this. If you were to ask me for a $10,000 gift, you would say, so Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support whatever the name of your nonprofit is or whatever the name of the campaign or initiative might be. And it is that simple. And because this is a webinar that I like to treat as a workshop, you can imagine what I'm going to ask you to do next as really fun in a live group, but I think it also speaks to the need for practice even when we're on a webinar. So on the count of three, I'd like you to all to ask me for $10,000. 1, 2, 3. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support? All right. Now what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes, and I'd like you to picture that language up on your blank screen, and on 3, I'd like you to repeat after me one more time. 1, 2, 3. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support whatever the name of your nonprofit is? And for those of you who learn best by writing, I'm suggesting you now take pen to paper, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write down that sentence. And now for a final time, let's say it again. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support whatever your nonprofit was? And that is literally how you ask for the gift. Now, do you walk in the door and do that? No. So we're assuming you're about, on average, you're going to be about 30 to 40 minutes into the visit when you ask for the gift, and we will put it in context for you, but I just wanted to start right off the bat with that language. And there's only one variation, and that's if you were to make a multi-year ask, meaning it's been determined that a donor may be able to give, let's say, more than $10,000, but the donor is used to giving more in the $5,000 a year zone. So it might be that you're asking someone for $5,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $15,000. So as you see, we ask them for the annual or the lower amount first, so we don't startle them with the total. We let them know the number of years, and we do the math for them. The math is simple usually, but it's just so that their brain doesn't go off and do the math. We want them to stay focused on the language. So it would be, so Diane, would you consider a gift of $5,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $15,000 to support whatever it is? So let's all together on 3 do that one. 1, 2, 3. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $5,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $15,000 to support your nonprofit? And that is, in the literal sense, a tried and true way to actually ask for the gift, which you'll have thought about, been advised of, know how much you're asking for before you go into the donor visit. And just to conclude this portion, which is the actual ask itself, I want to suggest to you that you absolutely don't want to speak after you have asked the donor until the donor speaks to you, because otherwise all you are doing is negotiating against yourself. If you've put something on the table, you've thought about it, they may have known you were going to ask them for a gift of some size, but they didn't know how much. So you really need to give them the space to think. And again, it does not advance your cause in any way whatsoever for you to keep chatting before the donor speaks and lets them know what they're thinking. Or sorry, lets you know what they're thinking, and they will. Usually it doesn't take too long before you hear some ums and some sounds. And you'll want to be watching the donor's body language. You'll want to be focused on how the donor is receiving the ask. That's where your attention should be. So to put this in some context, if we look at a 45-minute donor visit, you can see there's some opening chit chat. We're talking about the campaign or project. And then you see the actual ask itself is teeny tiny. We'll explore what happens if the donor says something other than yes, which is commonplace, and we'll talk about a technique in there, and then we'll talk about the visit conclusion and the next step. So that's the frame of where the ask fit into the total visit. And for the agenda for today, so we're going to do a quick intro to major gifts. We're going to talk a little bit about stories, and then we're going to talk about how to identify qualified donors, how to tier donors, setting up the visit, donor engagement tool, also known as a sort of case for support, so a different approach to it, how to respond to anything other than a yes. So the very typical, let me think about it, and then how to conclude the visit. So off we go. Just quickly, I think to get into a philosophical discussion of major gifts doesn't really get us anywhere, and we should really each look at our own organization, and I like the language that it's a gift that's beyond the typical gift that you're getting in the mail. $10,000 is often used. If you're smaller, that may be $2,500 a year for 4 years. Donors giving $1,000 without a specific ask are sending you a signal. You always want to pay attention to them. And wherever you're at right now, just a suggestion is to be aspirational. I always like to mention why individuals give, because there are a number of you out there who may do a lot of grant work. And although the people in foundations do give for these same reasons, foundation solicitations, they're often asking for a lot of financial data, all kinds of data. And yes, individuals do want data to back up what they're feeling, but the research tells us time and time again that individuals give on emotion. That's the driver. And it's just something to keep in mind as we put together our donor engagement, as we speak with donors. And so that is the number one driver. It's not to say we don't want to have data. We don't want to, for donors in particular who are very numbers oriented, yes, we want to have the backup numbers for them. And we need to have solid programs. But the key reason that most individuals will give comes out of how they're feeling. And where do we see that but in stories? So that's why there's a lot of buzz about stories that is running through the whole nonprofit sector and has been for the last few years, because the more we learn about why people give, then the more clear it becomes that stories are the way to go, because it's one of the easiest ways to create an emotional response. And here you see a before and an after, the only slide I'll read a touch of, which is before, please consider supporting the 124 children aged 4 to 17 in our hospital. A third of them are receiving advanced chemotherapy, etc. And then the after. 6-year-old Chelsea hugged her teddy bear tight. Teddy's hair didn't fall out, she said, patting her own bald head. So he's my good luck bear. He's going to help me get better from cancer. So thank you to Jeff Brooks. This appears in his Fundraiser's Guide to Irresistible Communications. I believe all the references I'll be mentioning today are at the back of your training materials in a reference section. What makes the after work? So yes, it's emotional, but what makes it emotional? And I just give you 10 seconds to just think about that, each of you who are listening here today. And so there are a number of different answers. One is that we're talking about one person. The example is about 6-year-old Chelsea. It's not about the 124 children, and not that 124 isn't a wonderful thing, but we can't relate to the 124. We can relate to 6-year-old Chelsea. Secondly, the actor is using what is known as word pictures. I love that language. Meaning you can picture her hugging her teddy bear. You can picture the whole scene. just from a sentence or two. And again, a very effective communication technique when we're talking with donors, either in writing or verbally. This kind of example more for annual fund, but the same principles apply for major gifts and everything else we're doing. Okay, now into more the direct steps in terms of a major gift program. How do we identify qualified prospects? So I expect that there'll be some organizations on board who it's your first time launching a major gift program. So I don't like to omit the obvious. I call it the gut reaction, simply who leaps to mind. We don't want to get lost in data and forget to just think about who we know, who's been engaged with the organization, who we've always said, gee, if we were ever get it together and launch a major gift program, we really ought to go to talk to these people or this person. So I want to make sure those people don't fall off the list. And beyond that, we're going to start looking at data. Certainly, you're going to look in the database, the most obvious, which is to, for example, look at your largest donors over the last 2 years or whatever numbers make sense based on the size of your particular donor base. And then the third area is what I'll call prospect research, which comes in two flavors, and I'll talk about both of those flavors today. You see one here, wealth screening. And this is to give us some wealth indicators about the donors in our donor base. And we get this data by actually sending our donor, at least we need name and home address, off to a company that specializes in this. And they've created databases that essentially are like super Google, as opposed to you having to Google around and look at real estate values, which are publicly available. All information is publicly available, and go try to see, did they make a gift to their alma mater, et cetera. They're databases that combine all of this information. And so on one Excel spreadsheet line, you can start to see, to the extent it's publicly available, some of the wealth indicators, which range from real estate values, does the person have a foundation, some of their philanthropy. Philanthropy is going to be a subset almost always, because there's no one philanthropy database. Rather, philanthropy data is getting accumulated record by record, gift by gift, as these database companies find them in the public domain. So that data tends to skew towards the larger universities and hospitals and larger organizations. So there may be donors who give all to smaller organizations and you never see it. But nonetheless, for some of your donors, you will get very helpful philanthropic data, to the point it shows you what this donor gives to, what kinds of organizations, and the amounts they're comfortable with. And we're always happy when we do get that data. The second type of data we're going to get is actually by drilling down further, and actually in the next slide, I will show you what a drill down looks like for an individual. So the wealth screening is like the umbrella. You send off, for example, your donor database in an Excel spreadsheet, and it comes back and you have sort of wealth indicators for your donor base. And then there's going to be the need to drill down into those, find out more information about the people that you select as potentials. So what we're looking for through both of these processes is really to align the donor's ability to give, whether or not they're philanthropic, and if they are philanthropic, whether your work is one of their priorities, and then finally, are they interested in this particular project? I really do want to point out that there are plenty of people with plenty of money, and they're just not philanthropic. And I like to say, our job is not to make people philanthropic who are not philanthropic. Our job is to figure out how to align all these stars and to present opportunities then that really invoke the donor's passion, and see if that works out. In terms of drill down, here's an example of what it looks like when we start to drill down, and you can see a donors giving there in the pie chart to what they give to. You see a summary of their real estate. You can actually check on the charitable gifts. Verification is required, so there's no just pushing a button. We all wish we could just push a button and have the answer, but really these are all tools. And we do need to verify. The more common a person's name is, I mean, imagine, Jane Smith. Well, okay, we know Jane Smith lives in New York, but there's probably still lots of Jane Smiths in New York. So are we sure that the data we're looking at really belongs to our Jane Smith? And so we do need to drill down further. The research tools will give us a sense of how confident they are that we are, in fact, looking at our Jane Smith. But we always want to double check and make sure that the data that's coming to us from outside sources is, in fact, associated with our particular donor. Here are the names of some of the, I'd say, more common subscription services that offer prospect research tools, and those are included in your resources. Okay. Tiering your donors. So we're kind of jumping now from identifying donors, we're going all the way past to how do we tier our donors. And I really like the work from Veritas Group on this. In fact, they're running a fabulous blog that talks about the entire major gift process. If you're not familiar with them, I would say that tidbit may be worth your price of admission today, so to speak, because their work is really exceptional. And I think it's, in a nutshell, it's to say, let's pretend this was looking at the caseload of 150 donors, but many of you, if you're smaller, you're not going to have anywhere near that number. But the point is that however many prospective major donors or actual major donors you're working with, you really want to allocate your valuable time based on the donors that are most likely to make the larger gifts. And who are we just kind of getting in the loop? Who are we keeping? And who are we spending a lot of time with? Because eventually they may be able to make a transformative gift. So all of these donors who are qualified as major donors, we are still talking about some level of personal attention, because they're not in our major donor world if we're not talking about personal attention. Otherwise, if they're just getting direct mail and calls and all that, that's not what we're talking about for major donors. But if they are, it's really important to allocate your effort, your time strategically. And I do, again, refer you to Veritas if you'd like more information about this, but this is the concept in a nutshell. Poll. So I thought it might be fun to get a sense of, from those of you who are listening, about what you think the most challenging part of the process might be. Alvin, is there something? There we go. I see poll open. So
yes, it's up there right now. And
okay, so
votes
great.
are coming in. So thank you, everybody, for participating.
All right.
And can you see it, by the way?
I just see poll must be closed to enable screen sharing.
Okay, don't worry. I'll read you the results.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a little bit more.
Okay.
They're moving around quite a bit, but I can tell you. All right. Well, it looks like it's pretty much solidified. So I'm gonna say the most challenging part of the major gift process is setting up the donor visit. While a distant second is figuring out how much to ask for, that's pretty much tied with dealing with, let me think about it.
Okay.
And then way back in in really fourth and fifth place is identifying the qualified donors, and then
Okay.
9% for asking for the gift.
All right. So I will say, thank you, Alvin. That's terrific. So we have a wise group of listeners or an experienced group of listeners, one of the two, because, excuse me, you will in fact find, once you're out doing this, that setting up the donor visit is the most challenging part of the process. So you have it. So we're going to start now with setting up the visit. And because, again, I like to keep this workshop oriented, Greg has agreed to do a role play with me. Are you there, Greg?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so Greg and I are going to do a little role play for you, and then we'll talk about what it was that we were doing. So I'm going to be calling Greg, and I'll have last seen him at the Healthy Families Gala. So here we go. Ring, ring, Greg.
Hello.
Hello. May I speak to Greg, please?
Yes, hi, this is he.
Hi, Greg. This is Diane Riemann from Healthy Families. We met at the gala last month.
Oh, hi. Yeah, good to see you. Good to
Hi.
chat with you.
Yeah. That was a fun event, huh?
Oh yeah, that was terrific.
Yeah. So why I'm calling today, Greg, is that Healthy Families is working on a couple of new initiatives that I would love to share with you and see what you think. And I'm hoping we might be able to get together Wednesday, April 17th at 3 or Thursday the 18th at 10 a.m., home or office, whatever most convenient. And you will have the opportunity to support one or both of these initiatives if you'd like to, but no obligation at all. Can you get together with me at one of those times?
Well, can't you just put something in the mail, Diane?
Well, Greg, we really don't have anything to put in the mail. These are new initiatives, so I'm agreed to have a conversation with people like yourself who've been involved with the organization and see what you think. Can we get something on the calendar?
Well, I'm kind of busy. How much time will this take?
Well, busy people like you who are so involved and so active are exactly the kind of people we want to speak to. So can you give Healthy Family Kids about 45 minutes?
Okay, I can do the 17th if it can be at 4, and if you can come to my office.
Absolutely. 4 o'clock on April 17th at your office would be great. I look forward to seeing you then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
All right. So that was a sample role play, and we'll talk about what happens when you can't get someone on the phone, because I realize sometimes the hardest part is how do I get in communication. But the tenets are the same, even if you're going to end up doing it via email. So we don't want to have the meeting on the phone, and we are looking to get together to have a conversation. And the important language I put in there is I did say to Greg, you will have the opportunity to support one or both of the initiatives if you'd like to, but there's no obligation at all. So I did let him know that there would be a financial possibility out there. I don't want to surprise him, but I also didn't use the language, and I'm coming to ask you for money. So the language about you will have the opportunity to support one of the initiatives if you'd like to is language that is more likely to get you the meeting, and yet is upfront that in fact we well may get to asking you for a gift. So I just wanted to point that out, that I like to include that so we're not surprising anyone. And what you did was, what you saw me do was, whatever the objection was, I was really going back to, I want to speak to you, you're important to us, we want to see what you think, which we do, and if there's a fit, there'll be an opportunity but no obligation. So that's the core concept independent of what the objection might be. You will see in your training packet that Greg will make available that there are lots of ways to handle lots of objections, and those are included there. And you also might have noticed I suggested 2 days and 2 times. I'm not sure who came up with 2 dates and 2 times is optimally effective, but it is very effective. All I'm trying to do is get the person to look at their calendar. I don't care if they're available those particular dates and those particular times. I have a victory in this call as soon as the donor is into their calendar. I'm happy. And then it's just a question of coming up with a date and time that works for both of us. You saw me offer home and office, which are preferred. If someone wants to go out, that's fine. Just try to find a reasonably quiet place, the middle of a busy Starbucks not being ideal. So that's the concept. The hardest thing is getting the person on the phone typically. And if you can't get the person on the phone, I often suggest calling, and if you don't get them, leaving a message saying who you are and that you'll be trying again the next day, so they have a heads up. Try again the next day. If I don't get them then, I might then say, so why don't I send you an email, and then go to email where I'm saying the same thing. You know, I'd like to talk to you about the initiatives. I want to hear what you think. And there'll be an opportunity to support if you'd like, but absolutely no obligation, etc. So it's pretty much the same language repeated. And you don't want to be the stalker, but you want to be persistent. So I usually suggest 3 tries, and then I might wait 2 to 3 weeks, because some people are in busy zones or they're traveling or whatever, and giving them time and space in between the tries or the set of tries, I found to be most successful. The last time I did a live training with people who actually had been out for a bit, what they all said was, we really didn't know how persistent we have to be. And that it would take sometimes 2 months to reach someone, but when they did, the person would then be willing to have the meeting. And so that's the sort of balance between persistence and being over pursuit. Also, I want to add that if you do run into the person in person, it's fine to have a personal chat in order to set up the visit. I had a client ask me that once and said, oh, I know I'm going to see so-and-so at school or here or there. Can I ask them in person? Absolutely. So if you have someone you text with, that's kind of you know them and that's your relationship, fine. If you go to email, fine. However you can set up the visit, fine. I also want to just take a moment to point out that every major gift program should give everyone going out the option to say they're not comfortable visiting with a particular person. And I divide the world into 3 groups. People you don't know at all, and there won't be any cold calling. We'll talk about how we would do a warm intro for you. People you know a bit, acquaintances, and people you know well. And potentially counterintuitively to some of you, the interesting play is over at people you know well. Because this is the place where these now are personal friends potentially, and you may not feel comfortable going and putting a financial piece into that relationship, even though you're going to ask them permission, and we'll get to that when we get to the donor engagement tool. You'll be asking permission, but nonetheless, you need to be comfortable. So I always suggest with all major gift programs, whoever's going out has the right to say, I'm not comfortable with this person. Also, we don't want to, especially as you're starting out, I don't see any need to be doing, quote, cold calls. So we'll always want you to have an e-introduction at the very least from an executive director or a board member or someone who knows the person you're going to be visiting, letting them know that you're going to be getting in touch and you're from this organization and here's what's doing, so that you're not just calling people out of the blue, especially as you're getting started. So setting up the visit, we were really at the very, very, very front end of the process. And now we're going to jump to the back end of the process. And I know it's a lot of jumping around, but I do want to get our memorize one sentence and learn two techniques in today. And that's why we are jumping through the process a bit here. And so now I want to go to the place where you have asked for a gift, okay? And you have gotten back, you know, the classic kind of let me think about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another role play with our wonderful potential donor, Greg, here. And then we'll talk about what I was doing, because I think it's easiest to kind of hear how it might play out. So,
okay, I'm here.
Here. So, Greg, we will have been let's pretend I was at your office. I've been chatting with you 30, 40 minutes, and I have your permission to ask you for a gift. And I've explained the funding, and I finally said, so Greg, would you consider a gift of $10,000 a year for 3 years for a total of $30,000 to support the Healthy Families Initiative?
Whoa, wait a couple seconds. Wow, Diane, I wasn't expecting that. I need to think about a gift like that. That's kind of large, and talk to, yeah.
And talk to, is it Susan you said?
Yeah, Susan.
That's your wife, right, Susan?
Right, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I understand, Greg, that you want to think about the gift and bring Susan into the conversation. So here's my question for you. Do we bring Susan literally into the conversation? I'd be happy to get together with the two of you. That way she can hear what the whole thing's all about. I can answer any questions that either of you might have.
No, I just need to run it by her once I've given it some thought.
Okay, that's fine. So then I just can be clear about where you're at right now, Greg. It seemed to me that you were very enthusiastic about the new initiatives we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great idea. Yes.
Super. And I do know that you want to think about the amounts and you need to talk to Susan. But that said, is this an amount that, all things being equal, kind of reflects the type of impact that you might want to have with this type of initiative?
Well, it might be on the high side, but I really just want to think about it.
Okay, I understand. Is there anything about the timing that would help you make the kind of gift you'd like to make here?
No, the boys are finished with college, and there's nothing really specific about the timing.
Ah, congratulations. It's Tom and Sam, right? That's great that they've graduated.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we do this? How about if I come back in 2 weeks and answer any questions you might have and see where you're at? Would 2 weeks from today work?
You really don't need to come back. How about I'll just give you a call?
Okay, so why don't we do this? I know I hate when I get voicemail and we go back and forth. How about if we set up a time for a quick call, just so we have something in our calendars? Is May 1st at this time good?
Sure. Yep, that'll work.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much for your suggestions. I'll certainly keep you posted about those, and I'll talk to you on May 1st.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
I haven't taken my acting classes, but hopefully that worked.
It did. Thank you. So, what were we doing? Let me get over here. Whoa, I jumped. So, when I don't get, or you don't get, a flat out yes, and most of the time, if you're asking donors for a bit of a stretch gift, you're not going to get an immediate yes. This is the place where I find I do a fair amount of interviewing of prospective major gift candidates for some clients, just because if I'm there. And the place I find that most people are less familiar is what to do when they get let me think about it, let me talk to my spouse, and there's detail on this in your training packet. But here's what I did, 2 things. So first, Greg gave me the spouse. I have to talk to my spouse. And so what I want to know is the spouse really part of the decision process, or is it a let me run it by her kind of situation? And so I asked the question, oh, so how about I come back and speak with the 2 of you? And that question I have found invariably gets me one of 2 answers. Either, yes, that's a good idea, which tells me that the person, the spouse, is in fact part of the decision process. And okay, I didn't know that ahead of time, but now I know. Or I get the answer Greg gave me. Well, no, that's not necessary. I just need to run it by her, in which case now I know that. And then I went on to use a program called Project Amount or Program Amount Timing. Pat, P-A-T, yourself on the back is the memory tool. I just was confirming and making sure I understand where Greg was at. Because all I heard out of Greg at the beginning was just, I kind of need to think about it. It's more than I was imagining, but I don't really know what he's thinking. And now I've given him a couple more minutes here while we're chatting. So I go back to, is this the project? Did you like the project? And this is one of the few times when I'm expressly asking a yes or no question. And the answer I'm going to get 99% of the time is yes. Because I probably wouldn't have even gotten to asking for a gift if I wasn't feeling the interest and enthusiasm and permission for the project. And so really what I'm doing, and this is a technique that does come out of the sales world, is I'm getting Greg back into yes mode. Yes, I do like that initiative or project or campaign or whatever it is. And then I acknowledge that I understand you want to think about the amount, but I just rechecked. Is this an amount that you imagine reflects the kind of impact you want to have here? And I have no idea what I'm going to hear back. I may hear, I just need to think about it, which is what I heard here, or I may hear something else. I may learn more. And then I have timing available to see if there's something we can do about the timing to make this possible. So that's the core technique that can be used with almost any other than yes answer to the ask that you've just made. And again, you'll see more variations on the theme in your packet. Now I'm going to jump us back. Sorry, I did go out of order. And I'm going to go to the beginning of the visit. And so now just really nitty gritty, as you're going to someone's home in particular, if you do see something to compliment, it creates nice rapport if it's authentic. I mean, oftentimes you really do see either some great view or gardens or photos or whatever it may be. If you are offered refreshments, accept, as I like to say. It doesn't matter if you're hungry. It doesn't matter if you're thirsty. I actually had one client I was training say to me, oh, well, I usually bring my own water. And I'm like, no, in this case, you really want to create rapport with the donor. And so if you're offered refreshments, take them. If it's something you cannot eat or drink, you can always ask for water, but you don't want to go self-equipped. And you're looking at the beginning of the visit to learn more about the donor. What prompted your first gift if your relationship is new and you really don't know. You could ask them about their philanthropy as the chat is progressing. That may not be the first question you ask, but it can be part of an opening conversation. And then in terms of the actual case for support, I really like the work of For Impact, the SUDS group, totally Googleable. They've given permission to have their materials used as long as they get credit. And this is going to be a 2-page slide because the concept here, it's think about how you create ideas on the napkin, how you're inventing things and you're drawing it out on a napkin. Well, this is just taking the napkin idea and kind of blowing it up to a larger size. They actually suggest going even beyond legal size paper, and certainly to legal size paper. So everyone feels like it's a conversation, and that there's a flux to it. It's not all written in stone. And so you can see the pieces and parts to this. You have, what is your organization all about? You might have your founding story, a couple other stories. Important piece is you see the 3 circles there, and you want no more than 3 initiatives. These would be the 3 initiatives or 3 elements of your campaign. If it's just one campaign, it can be one thing. And you're going to be explaining where the funds will be used, examples and little snippets alongside. And they actually get a permission to proceed even before they go to the sort of priorities. I like to get the permission to proceed, and I agree with them totally. The second one down you see is before you get into the funding. And so after you have spoken with the donor about what it is that you have in mind, you've had the donor, one of the great techniques you can do with this tool is have the donor point to the circle with the priority that's most important to them and talk about it. So once you've honed in on what is really important to the donor, you're literally going to say, can I proceed to the funding now? I know it is so simple, but it is that simple. You are getting the donor's permission to go on and talk about how that initiative that they're interested in, or all the initiatives, if they're interested in all of them, will be funded. And here's, I know it's a little hard to read, but here's an example of one that they have on their website of when this is filled out. Imagine it on a much larger sheet of paper, and you can see the flow of the conversation starting way high up about how familiar they are with the organization, what is most important to them, and then literally, can I talk to you about how you can help? And that is, the donor has now given you permission, again, because you really asked them when you were calling them to set up the visit, to go on and talk about the funding opportunities. So again, much more information on this for Impact, the SUDS group, and I do highly recommend that. Okay, I jumped. Sorry, folks, I did do a jump there. I skipped those slides. So we've already done, then you made the ask. How do you respond to not getting a yes with program amount timing? And now negotiating. So here you are, and I was there with Greg, and when I did the ask, Greg said to me, well, Diane, I wasn't expecting that. And then he went on to say he'd need to think about a gift like that and ask his wife. And what's really important to remember, especially if you're new at this, is not to overreact to what the donor says initially. Wow, that's more than I was thinking. That's a big number. Those are initial reactions. You don't want to put your dollar values, your personal dollar values, into the mix. This is really all about what the donor thinks, and you don't want to negotiate unless you hear there's no way in the world I can do that, or I can't possibly afford that. And if that's what you hear, then you can offer first a timing solution. And if that doesn't work, I have devised this pretty simple negotiation strategy. It's very respectful to the donor, and all my clients tell me that they're very comfortable using it. It seems to work well. And so there's only 2 steps. So the first step is to reduce the ask by 50%. And I'm assuming that we're not asking for multi-millions of dollars here, where that might not be the right strategy, that we're probably asking for gifts that are under, I don't know, $250,000, if not much smaller. And the reason the 50% asks works is because the donor feels like they've been heard. If you just drop by 20% or 30%, first of all, you end up in this kind of haggling position that no one wants to be in. And we really want the donor to know that you heard them when they said, we can't possibly do that. So I would have taken a $10,000 a year for 3 years for a total of $30,000 if I had heard there was no way we can do that. As much as we like the project, I would have then come back with a re-ask with that same ask language. So I would have said, so Greg, would a gift of $5,000 a year for 3 years for a total of $15,000 make it possible for you to have the kind of impact you want to have here? And then if I still get Greg saying to me, Diane, I'd love to be doing that, but we can't, then I would say, so tell me, Greg, what works for you? And I flip it back. And so because we haven't gotten into this haggling thing, everybody stays comfortable, the donors feel good about it, and as does the person in your seat who's actually asking the donor. So that's the negotiation strategy. But again, my big caution, especially if you're new at this, is to not take first reactions and move them into negotiation. Most of the time, if we've done our research right, we know the donors to some extent, we've asked them for a stretch gift, they really just need time to think about it. That is the, by far, most common place that these conversations get to. And so how do we conclude the visit, again, assuming you did not get a yes? So the gold standard, and you heard me ask Greg, can I come back again and meet, and I can answer any questions you might have, etc. I usually offer to come back in a couple of weeks unless it's national and I'm traveling, and then I might need more time. And oftentimes, though, I'm going to be told, no need to come back. You know, I understand what this is. I'll call you. And then my goal is to absolutely set up a phone time. You will find yourself chasing if you don't leave with a plan for something as simple as a call. In terms of getting referrals, who else might be interested in this? I'm most comfortable doing it once the quote solicitation process is finished, not in the middle, but there are various people who have various opinions on that. And then what you want to do once you've left the donor's house or office or wherever is to send notes to whomever you've been instructed to at the organization. It is key that we keep the databases up to a really, really important step that I don't want to overlook. So I end with the thought that giving is in fact good for your health. And as I believe I said in the 2 weeks ago when I first did this, when I think about why I like to do this work, I mean, I just started blindly going out there, but all I was doing was having wonderful conversations with people who care about something I care about. And some people said yes to the gift, some people said no to the gift. And that partly explained why I like to do this. And then I went to a conference, the Professional Prospect Research Organization had a keynote address that really talked about all the research that shows giving is good for your health. And so the reality is when donors make gifts to initiatives, campaigns, etc., that they care about, good things happen to them literally. Their blood pressure goes down. Their pleasure centers light up. All good things. You are indeed Dr. Feelgood. And I will end there, Greg, and turn it back to you. Hello?
Yes, all right, terrific. Thank you
Um,
very much. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That was terrific. Very glad to have you. And I do have questions, by the way, from
Okay.
the audience. But before we jump right into that, I'm going to just do a really quick song and dance about Market Smart. So I hope the 100 or so people that are on will bear with me and actually hopefully enjoy to just learn really quickly about us, and making sure that you all can see my screen. If Alvin can take care of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you?
Yes, I can.
Terrific. Then everybody else can. Wonderful. Okay, so really quick, Market Smart is really the ultimate prospect qualification tool. It's not about wealth screening, but it's about trying to understand why your donors want to give and what is their level of capacity. So what we do is we help nonprofits determine the why, not necessarily the who, first. And we learn things from the donors thanks to them letting us know how they want to give. So some of our clients have given us really great feedback and testimonials to explain what we've done. It is different, but it starts pretty much like a donor discovery call would with your donors face to face. But we'll take a list of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of prospects, and we'll ask them just to simply take a donor survey. Then our artificial intelligence will use the verbatims, the survey responses, to create pre-populated automated emails that will drip over time as people are considering whether or not to give. And these emails never ask for money. They're really cultivation emails talking about impact and how supporters can be the hero in their own life story. So we're sending emails out that tell stories, and they're highly relevant based on how people answered the survey questions. So if they like cats, they'll get emails about cats, for instance. So these drip emails happen over time, and then as people click on them and watch videos, view the stories, download information, whatever it may be, they move through the consideration process, and our algorithm creates scores to help you zero in on who is really ready. Who should you prioritize for your outreach and for your call? And it all gets logged in a dashboard that you can sort, especially based on recency. And oh, by the way, there's one other trick to it, is that we track where people are clicking online, so that if they're clicking a lot on certain videos or downloading the Quest language or something like that, then you know not only what to talk to them about, but you know the recency of when they've engaged. And all this helps you zero in ideally on the best qualified prospects, so you have the best meetings and close the biggest gifts the fastest at lower costs. So that's really pretty much what we do. And if you want more details on that, just come visit our website and request a demo. All right. So that's enough of that snippet. Thank you for bearing with me. It looks like almost everybody stayed. Thank you. So with that, are you ready to do some questions and answers, Diane?
Absolutely. And thank you, Greg. I love your service. Sounds wonderful in terms of everything we've been talking about here today.
Indeed. Indeed. So I've got 4 so far. So if you have questions, everybody, just go ahead and fill out the questions box. But otherwise, I'll start on the first one. Is, do you recommend leaving voicemails? It's hard to get people on the phone.
I'm sorry, do I what to leave in voicemails?
You recommend leaving voicemails.
Okay. So if we're talking about setting up the visit, I would not usually leave the whole message on a voicemail, but rather say I'm calling from and you know who I am. I'm calling from, you know, I'd like to talk with you about whatever the organization is, and then something like, you know, I will try you back tomorrow. I wouldn't start leaving the story about wanting to come and make a personal visit, etc., in my voicemail.
Okay, great, thank you. Next is, I've been told to get our board members involved in the Ask. What are your thoughts on that? Can you outline recommendations?
Sure. So my approach to fundraising comes from being a board member, which I've now been on various boards for 15 years now. So number one, I want to say, from my perspective, it is unrealistic to look for an entire board to do anything. So we're looking for the, however many it is, 3, 4, 5 board members who are willing to participate in this type of fundraising. And it is wonderful to have a board member along with a staff member. That is considered the gold standard, because staff, you know the nitty gritty, but it's your job. And then we have a board member who's a volunteer. So that makes for a wonderful combination. That said, to be practical, especially with smaller organizations, especially with the smaller asks you may be doing. So I'm not talking about, you know, you're going out for $100, but let's pretend in your organization, maybe you're making some $5,000 and $10,000 asks, but you're also making some $25,000 and $50,000 asks. If you have to figure out where to be efficient, use the board members for your larger asks.
Great. Okay, and by the way, more questions are rolling in, so if you'll stay with us, I'd like to answer them all, and it looks like almost everybody is staying online to hear them, so that's good. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, this one's completely self-serving, and I know who wrote this one, but I won't say his name, but he says, use Market Smart, not donor search, with 7 exclamation points. Okay, thank you.
So, well, but yeah, that's fine. But let me say something about that. Actually, I would say use. I would say. Well, I'm going to say use both because they're very different. They're completely different.
Yeah, I agree.
They're doing completely different things, and so figuring out where your donors are engaged. I don't know where you had a staff member set up here, but it's important because you're offering something new that people like me are not talking about yet. And so, you know, I have to decide, you know, where I might want to put something like this tool in there too, because you're looking at really honing in on engagement and who's engaged enough to even respond to you. But then at some point, some other kinds of qualification needs to take place. And that's where the donor searches come in, and the other screening companies. So it's really not an either or.
No, and I agree with that. In fact, a lot of people use us and then add well screening after, or they do well screening first and then they use us. So I won't say his name, but this is a consultant who's actually a friend. So he's
that's fine.
Move on. Okay, just great webinar. Thank you. With it, and that's from Ellen. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Okay, how can we download the slides, and will auto recording be available? I'll just answer this. Yes, we'll be sending that in. We usually wait about a week to send that out. Keep it a little exclusive. Let's see.
Can I just add to that, Greg?
Yes.
So just to say, so my style is I've prepared what I call a training packet. So it's not identical to my slides. So my slides were designed for me to speak from, but in the training packet is a lot more examples of the kinds of objections you might get setting up the visit, or objections you might get after you make the ask. And there's a full resource sheet where you can go Google all those great resources I talked about and get more detail on the various areas that I mentioned. So Greg will be sending you that training packet soon.
Great, yes, and very good, and we will get that out, we promise. Now this one's kind of long, so bear with me. We
Okay.
are a horse rescue, which by the way, I have 2 horses, so I'm glad to hear that, Karen.
Okay.
We're a horse rescue, so there are not many initiatives other than rescue, training, and adoption, all about saving the life of a horse. We are just launching our Major Gifts program. Would I ask them if they are more interested in training or adoption, or just assume that they are all about the same thing and just ask them for them to support the entire operation? So what she's talking about is almost like a restricted ask rather than a
Right.
unrestricted.
Right. So I'm going to answer like this. It's an important point, Karen. Donors want to see the impact of their gift, be able to see the impact of their gift, and of course they want to give to the things that are most important to them. So although we might like all this unrestricted gifts, by not allowing donors to hone in on the piece of your operation, if there is a piece of your operation that's most important to them, we are actually, research tells us, there's a wonderful researcher named Penelope Burke, who tells us that we're actually limiting our revenues. So when you do tell your story, and if you do have various aspects of your operation like you do, like you have the training aspect and the adoption aspect, you do want to understand what the donor is most interested in, unless they may well be interested in the whole thing, and that's fine too. But I definitely suggest giving the donor the option to hone in if you have very distinctive elements of what it is that you do.
Got it. Great. There's just 2 more, unless more roll in. My ED, I guess that means executive director. My ED
Yep.
telling me to find new major donors who have not donated yet, but it seems like there's plenty of opportunity in our database already. Should I go outside our data? I think you might have answered that one.
Well, that's important. That is a key question all the time. I get asked this all the time. And so everyone has a dream that out in the great ether is this donor they don't know. And maybe there is and maybe there's not. But the effort to go figure that out and find that person is monumental compared to the effort to make sure that there's no one who's already told you that they're interested in what you do by actually having already made a gift. So my answer is, unless you have exhausted your donor base, I absolutely would not start going outside. You're going to be using much more energy. It's a much longer process. And so the cost-effective approach is to make sure that you understand who's already giving to you.
I agree 1,000, 10,000%. Good. Okay, well, more coming in. Holly, thank you. I know you were just referred to us from Gary. Thanks for joining us. After several attempts to contact donors that are on your list, on your prospect list, do you keep them on your list? Okay. So I guess the question is, when do you give up?
Yeah, when do you give up? I would say after a 6-month period of again, not trying and then giving it a rest and then trying and giving it a rest, I would then put them on a sub list, maybe wait another year, see if they do see if anything happens with them. Do they come to something? Does anything change at all? And then if something does, put them back on once they've taken any sort of action. But it can take as long as 6 months to make contact.
I'm going to throw out here what we do in the private sector. And I hope everybody listening can recognize that what we sell here at Market Smart to you, the fundraiser, we treat you, you are major donors to us. So our process is very much like what you have to do. And what we do after several attempts, if someone's not responding, we do what we call a breakup call or a breakup email. And you have to be very polite about it. And sometimes, and we say, and tell me what you think, Diane. But we say, look, I understand that this might not be the right time, so I will stop bothering you in the nicest possible way.
Okay. So, all right. So as long as, we understand most major donors were already giving us something, and so we don't want to in any way shoo them away. But if you have been trying to reach out, you can, I'd almost call it, you can close the circle for now, is the language I would prefer.
Yeah. Remember,
I
use brass knuckles in the marketing here.
Okay. So you can close the circle for now by saying, I have tried, we're so thrilled that you're a supporter. I have tried to reach out to you, about da-da-da-da-da. It looks like this might not be of interest. So, thanks again for all your support. And then if you, that kind of closeout, I think is fine, but we don't want to close them out any more than that, because if we were to have, and we also want to try to focus the closeout on the particular campaign or initiative that we were talking to them about. And not that we gave them a lot of description, but we might have, given the headline about what the thing is. And so then in another year or two, we can certainly come back with something else. So I think I'd want to keep that closeout focused on this particular campaign or initiative or whatever it was.
Agreed. Especially because it might not be a good time right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so there's only one left. Oh, no, they keep rolling in. Okay, here we go. Lorraine, thank you. Do you agree the ask meeting, in quotes, is after your discovery meeting or research beforehand? I think I understand that.
Okay, I do. I think I understand. So here, I'm going to answer that question this way. Back in the day, and again, part of this depends on how much you're asking for. I'm often working with smaller nonprofits, so we're not asking for like seven-figure, multi-million-dollar gifts. Multi-million-dollar gifts, and even, multi-$100,000 gifts. You may be meeting with a donor multiple times, get clear on the interest, get clear on the project, etc. But if you're downstream from that, you're smaller, the things have changed. Everyone is so busy. I find, and my clients find, and I know my peers find, that often 1 to 2 visits is it. By the second visit, you are asking for the gift. And sometimes on the first visit, if you already know the donor and you're then going to talk about a specific campaign, I would say before you even do your initial donor visit to get to know the donor, you should have done the research first, and you should have some clue about, if by any chance the meeting evolves itself into the solicitation, because sometimes you may say something and the donor goes, oh, I love that, tell me how to get more involved. You need to be prepared. So although those getting to know your donor visits may absolutely end up with no solicitation, I think it's important to do the research first and then adjust based on what you've learned, add that to their file.
Terrific. And by the way, we've got 2 more, unless more roll in. Mm-hmm. We're just going to keep rolling if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah, people are still here, a lot. So,
okay.
And also, this one is actually directed at me. So, Karen, thank you for this question. Is Market Smart the same technology that was used during the recent presidential election? The data mining and directed social media pieces based on what was learned about each voter. Okay, so yes, but no. In other words, we use that technology, but we use actually a lot more than that. That technology and elections in general are based on what I call populist fundraising approaches, because to get
Mm-hmm.
someone to give, you're just trying, getting them to give means you're pretty much getting a vote. That's a populist approach. What we're doing is zeroing in on the 80-20. We're trying to find the high value, high capacity, highly engaged, highly passionate. So we don't mind if it's less people that are engaged as long as they have high capacity. So it's even more detailed and more personalized than the populist approach, which can be one to many. But of course, I want you to get a demo and we'll show you what we're talking about. There's one more question, last one, unless more roll in. From Trish, is there a dollar amount that triggers an in-person visit versus an email or direct mail approach to a donor solicitation ask?
Okay. I hate to fudge, but the answer is it really depends on your organization, and you have to think about your time. I mean, it does take, typically some number of hours, and I'm assuming the donor's local, even more if you have to go nationally. So here's, I guess, the general rule of thumb, and I have talked with my consulting colleagues about this, because we all get calls about, okay, so we have this donor, that's out in California or here or there, and we'd like to even interrupt the rest of the story. The answer is, if it's an ask of $10,000 or more, we always say, get on the plane, because we think it's worth it for you to go visit with that donor, and that's even to get on the plane. So certainly for $10,000, we certainly want to be doing in-person visits. It's not that no donors will ever give you $10,000 not in person, but that is the most likely way to get that kind of amount. And then you kind of go down from there, depending on your organization. I mean, if you're a teeny tiny organization, you're just starting, you may want to go to your $1,000 donors, because that may be worth it to you to get your $1,000 donors to see if they'll go to 2,500. But if you're, you've been going for a while and et cetera, so maybe you're looking for the people who can give you $2,500 a year for 4 years. But $10,000, again, for sure, you do want to make an in-person visit. And after that, it really depends on, how many donors you have and can you get to them all, and sort of tiering them out about where you're going to spend your time.
Great. Well, there's no more questions coming in, although Diane, I could listen to you talk about this stuff all day. I love
that's sweet, Greg.
But thank you so much, and thank you for all of you participating and coming back. If you were on that first one, again, I apologize, but I'm so thrilled that so many people came back. Diane, this was fabulous. We've got to do something like this again, maybe a slightly different topic, but you're outstanding, and I want to thank everybody. And this is Market Smart, I guess, signing out. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.